The Iran nuclear deal front and center in Washington today. John Kerry on the Hill defending it. Republicans, not surprisingly, blasting it. And the president, he's hitting them back over it. Then, if you believe the polls, this man, the Donald, is in the lead. But many Republican experts, they're not buying the numbers, and they're not buying into the Donald. Also, New York State about to announce the companies that are getting medical marijuana licenses. The process so secretive, though, they could wind up growing or selling pot right on your block, and you won't even know it. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And tonight, we start with that Iran nuclear deal and Secretary of State John Kerry, who was on Capitol Hill to answer questions about it and convince Congress. At the end of the day, it's a good deal for America.
The agreement is the agreement. That's why we've been so clear, Mr. Chairman. Nothing in this agreement is based on trust. It is specific with its annexes in declaring what is expected of whom and when. And that precision is what gives us confidence we'll be able to hold them accountable.
Now, there is no question the deal is controversial, but is comparing it to the Holocaust going too far? Well, that's what one presidential candidate did. Mike Huckabee said this week.
He's so naive, he would trust the Iranians and he would take the Israelis and basically march them to the door of the oven.
Now, President Obama, he immediately denounced those comments.
So naive, he would trust the Iranians and he would take the Israelis.
Trust me, the president didn't like the comments, and he said so. Now, for his part, Huckabee refusing to apologize, and he says Jews support his comments. Those, again, the words of Mike Huckabee. But many American Jewish leaders and Israeli politicians, they are criticizing what he said. Now, I want to bring in a panel here to talk about what happened on the Hill today, where this issue goes from here, and also as a political issue, and it will be throughout the balance of this year into next. Shelley Mayer, she's a Democratic Assemblywoman representing the great city of Yonkers. To her left, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Scott Vanderhoff, an attorney and former multi-term Rockland County executive. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Okay, I'll start with you, Scott. The secretary went to the Hill today to try and convince people that it's not just we'll trust the Iranians blindly, there's a good deal. And he says that it's got backstops to it and conditions. And if the conditions aren't met, the sanctions come right back in. Mission accomplished or no?
It seems to me that we're on the right track despite what Republicans are saying. Primarily because if you believe what Kerry has said, and I have no reason, I don't have a personal reason or a political reason or otherwise to question it. If you're not talking about just trust with Iranians, you're talking about verification, and that can be documented, etc. Then I think the wiser approach is to try to stop whatever advance they have on nuclear weapons at this point. The problem with this whole thing, though, is this is not long term. It's a temporary deal. It really is only to allow certain other things to take place in diplomacy and political action, and that requires Iran to change its approach to Israel, which is, damned hard, and you've got a lot of other things going on. So this is a very temporary deal that I think, if it's verifiable, can perhaps go and do something positive with respect to the Mideast. Having said that, this is all a political games deal. I mean, this is now the presidential election year,
yep.
And I'm afraid, and I'm really very afraid, that you're dealing with international politics of a very extreme technical nature being thrown into the pot of political.
And I'll get to the politics in a second, Andrew. But on the deal points, there's several key issues that were said at the time, and they still exist today. Some folks say, time out, this is, as Scott said, not a permanent deal. This is up to 15 years, and even the administration acknowledges by that time they could refine the uranium to the point where they could weaponize. Secondarily, Iran has always been and continues to be a state sponsor of terror here. What guarantees do we have that they're going to mend their ways, if you will, and not fund some of these extremist groups here that are causing so many problems in the Middle East? There's the hostage issue, the outstanding hostages that are there. And then finally, there's this basic premise that they won't be as transparent and open as we believe them or want them to be. And history serves as a guide for that. What do you think of the ones that I mentioned and more? They got to convince Congress. They'll still get it through. The president's got the stick to override this, but what do they have to get him through so he can say he's got political support on the Hill?
I mean, I sort of think that there are members of Congress who have latched on to each one of those points that you've made. And of course, the overall support for Israel, particularly by conservative Republicans and by Democrats with heavily Jewish constituencies, I don't think they're going to come around no matter what the argument is. Keep in mind that the administration really only needs to protect 1/3 of the votes in each chamber, because Congress is almost surely going to vote these things down. The president will veto it, and then the question is, can Congress override the veto? So it's really about who you're standing with on this one. It's are you going to be on the president's team if you're appealing to Democrats, or are you going to go with the people who are saying no? So I think it's going to be individual sales pitches to individual members of Congress.
Let me get to the politics part, and I'll talk to the Assemblywoman in a second, Dominic, about the Democrat side. But on the Republican side, Mike Huckabee has already done with this issue what we've seen on other issues, where now he's going to force Republicans, probably as early as the debate that we're going to see in the first week of August, to answer the question, do you believe that supporting the Iran deal is akin to a modern-day Holocaust for Israel? How much of a box has he put Republicans on this issue? There's one thing opposing it, but opposing it that far. And then if you don't go that far, what are you also sending messaging to the Republican base? He's put them in a bind.
I would use the word pickle. They're definitely, I agree with you, they're in a bind. All of this smells of politics, as the county exec and Andrew just pointed out, because that's exactly what it is in a presidential year or regarding a diplomatic agreement. The Republicans, one by one, you are 1,000% correct. I think the debate is next week. They're going to line them up, the 10 that are fortunate to be on that stage, and the home state governor will probably be sitting in the audience and not allowed to take part in a debate, but that's another topic for another day. And they're going to be asked, almost like the debate if you referenced when they were asked to raise your hands. That's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to find themselves in a pickle. They're going to have to move more to the right, and as we all know at this table, you can move to the right or to the left, but when it comes to the general election, you got to come back towards the center.
But there's no daylight among the Republicans right now. None of them are on the fence about whether they support this deal or whether they oppose it. They all oppose it. So they're all going to raise their hands when they're asked.
Do they support the rhetoric?
Right.
Well, I'm sure they'll go with the flow on the
Holocaust.
rhetoric. I mean, rhetoric is one thing, but you're not asking to push them very far based on what Huckabee said. They don't have to go a whole lot further than where they are.
Well, Huckabee's trying to out-Trump Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he's doing. I mean, and it's outrageous.
Yeah.
It is
I mean, it's like
so over the top. I mean, you cannot allow the Holocaust to be used as a tool in a political debate. It's just, it's off the table.
And
It is
comparing
really
people to
off the
Hitler,
table.
I mean, how many times do they do this?
But I agree with you. Trump uses all the air, so he's trying to get himself into the air and then not to apologize. That's just to keep it alive. I think we just have to put our foot down about the use of a Holocaust as a tool in these political debates. It's just so objectionable to those that are alive and those that are not alive.
I 100% agree with you. We tried to get Congressman Eliot Engel, who's the ranking member
Yes.
on the International Affairs Committee that was involved in these hearings. He couldn't make it, but he's already on record as saying that he's uncertain and he's also concerned about
Yes.
this. If you're an elected, in this case a Democratic congressman who's got a big Jewish population in their district, how dangerous is this issue for you?
I've spoken to Congressman Engel. He represents Yonkers, and this is a tough issue. This is a tough issue. One thing I would say that we're not talking enough about is this is ripe with details. You know, we can talk in generalities, but if you actually are going to drill down into the protections, I believe, as Scott said, they tried to build in as many protections as they could and reach a negotiated agreement without breaking the deal apart. I think you have to go through every one of them and determine as a whole, is this thing good enough for you?
But the broader issue for me is this. There's no such thing as a perfect agreement. It would have been nice. I think they could have pushed harder and got a few more assurances. Maybe they did in diplomatic back channels to say they got to let the Iranians save a little face, but maybe. But at the end of the day, it's not like the status quo was perfect. Sure, the sanctions were hurting Iran, but it didn't mean that we had access to see what they were doing or weren't doing. It's not like America was any safer if we did nothing.
Oh, and that's the president's point. We were going to be less safe if we did nothing, and the consequences of doing nothing are great. I just say the details matter in this document.
And I think it's very important to add that this doesn't make Iran a good state.
No.
I mean,
No.
they are still our enemy in that respect. And anything they do with respect to going off the reservation is something that then comes back to these verifications. And the other thing about this is not just the United States. Russia's into this thing, China's into this thing, two countries where we have real serious problems.
I mean, they can make money off this deal once you lift the sanctions.
Well, if we're
with
the only
Iran.
ones who keep the sanctions, it's like having no sanctions at all, because the rest of the world will start trading with Iran, and it's meaningless.
When we come back here, speaking of the president, he says if he was allowed to run again, he'd win again. We'll debate whether or not he may be believing his poll numbers a little too much. Would he beat the Donald? Trump getting a bump in the polls, but can you trust those numbers? A lot of GOP operators, for one, do not.